It's a space dedicated to one of the most shameful times in human history. When you walk in, you feel a responsibility almost immediately to pay attention and listen to not just the tales, but the vivid, terrifying realities of the Holocaust victims and survivors. The fear, the despair, the misery. But when you first step into the immersive, interactive, self-guided journey inside the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, you hear the voice of a monster, not much different than this.
Deutschland ist nun erwacht. Die Macht haben wir nun in Deutschland gewonnen.
It's jarring, it's disturbing, it's meant to be. Hitler, leader of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, known as the Nazis, took power in January 1933.
Ich schwöre bei Gott, diesen heiligen Eid, dass ich dem Führer Adolf Hitler.
2 years later, Hitler and his army of Nazis introduced new race laws.
Reichsbürger ist nur der Staatsangehörige deutschen oder artverwandten Blutes. Eheschließungen zwischen Juden und Staatsangehörigen deutschen oder artverwandten Blutes sind verboten.
At that time, some 9.5 million Jews lived in Europe, more than 60% of the world's Jewish population. In a little more than a decade, the majority of those European Jews, 2 out of every 3, would be killed. You see, the Nazis wanted to create a racially pure Germany, whose so-called superior traits would make it ideally suited to rule the entire European continent. Nazi Germany invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939, starting World War II.
We have to learn from history.
We have to learn from history.
We do.
This
history is very painful because this teaches us about the death camps where the systematic killing happened. Look at Treblinka. There were 870 to 925,000 people murdered in 13 months. So that would be about 70,000 people a month. They were death camps. You went there, and if you survived at all for a short period of time, you were working as part of that process. But within a couple of months, you would be murdered. After 1.5 million Jews were murdered by, an individual shooting them, the Nazis realized that was very, very difficult. It was emotionally difficult for the people doing it, and it wasn't efficient. And this is a horrible thing to say, but they wanted their murder to be more efficient. Their goal was to kill 11 million Jews, every single man, woman, and child throughout Europe. And they met at this table with this piece of paper trying to figure out how best to do that. And that's when they decided to open the death camps and to start the systematic killing through the gas chambers, where they could kill thousands of people a day. They called that the final solution to the Jewish problem. You've probably heard that term, the final solution. So to implement the final solution, they created this very intricate camp system. It was very organized and very methodical. I'm sure you've heard about Auschwitz-Birkenau, right? There were 6 death camps that we'll learn about. But now the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, they have documented 44,000 camps throughout occupied Europe. These dots, pins, represent 6% of the camp system throughout Europe. It would have been impossible to live in one of those countries and not see people suffering, starving to death, and not know what happened.
I'll tell you, this reminds me of what's happening in China
to the Uyghur Muslims,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
They are in concentration camps
They are.
because of
Their
the Muslims and their religion.
So in this gallery, Samira, we learn about the Jews of Poland, which there were 3.3 million Jews. At the end of World War II, 3 million of the 3.3 million had been murdered. And many of them died in the ghetto systems. The ghettos were part of those camps where they were used to contain the Jews. They were forced to move into these constricted areas that were restricted and walled off. They had very, very tiny food rations, maybe 180 calories a day, and were used for forced labor. And so many Jews died from illness and starvation. But then they began systematically deporting them from the Jews to the death camps. Women, children, the elderly, anyone that looked like they weren't strong enough to work would be sent to the gas chambers. And then people that looked like they still had enough energy to be useful would be sent to work in airplane factories, work that was helping support the war effort for the Nazis. But while they were working, they were being starved to death, they were being brutalized, they were dying of disease under horrific conditions. You know, as the Nazis were losing the war and retreating, they also were starting the process to deny what had happened and to try to hide the evidence. So they kept records of all of these atrocities. And that's why it's so hard to believe that today people would deny that this happened, because there's firsthand testimony of people that lived through it. There's written evidence, there's recorded evidence of people being murdered, and people are still denying it.
You can't deny genocide, right?
Well, it's the last stage of genocide always.
Yes.
Any Jews that were still living in that camp system were sent back to Germany, and oftentimes it was on foot. And so that's a part of the Holocaust that's referred to as the death marches. They were, walking through the cold, no food, no shelter for months sometimes. And many Jews died that way.
I believe that the world is just a very hard place to live at, to see. I hate seeing all those people getting hurt, and women and children, getting hurt.
These columns help you go back and think about the 12-year process, 33 where Hitler's elected, how the deaths rapidly increased. So this is the columns are the Jewish death toll. 1942 is when the gas chambers were implemented. So as we leave the Holocaust, we enter our human rights wing. Our goal in this wing is to focus on the world's response to the Holocaust. And there were 3 things that happened to really start to develop the framework of the modern human rights movement. So the first was the trials at Nuremberg. It was the first time that there had been an international military tribunal. It was called representational justice. And the next 2 things that happened in response to the Holocaust were, the creation of the United Nations, and their first 2 acts were the creation of this Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Eleanor Roosevelt was the co-chair of that committee. She really based this on of our Constitution. All of the UN member states signed on to this, but it was really just an aspirational document. So even though all of the member nations agreed that you had the right to be considered innocent until proven guilty, we're still working. Freedom from slavery. We're still working, even in our own country, to ensure that all of our citizens have these rights. Not much was done with the Universal Declaration until the 70s. So we know Martin Luther King referred to this in some of his speeches, and then Elie Wiesel referred to this in trying to get the world to respond to contemporary genocide. This room is somber again, because in this room we learn about other genocides, and what we try to do in this gallery is teach about the process of genocide. It was important for us to be able to define it and to know how we would respond to it. Do you see this? The time clock is the rate at which 800,000 people would be murdered in 100 days. That pace is so mind-boggling.
Is it real time?
Mm-hmm. When it gets to 800,000, it will reset. So every 100 days, it resets.
That is not an easy thing to see. It's just horrific, what has happened to human beings and what human beings can inflict on other human beings.
We created these graphic novels. It's a way for students to learn this history in a medium that they're comfortable with. Mm-hmm. It tells the story of the genocide in Guatemala, and it helps us understand the stage of classification through the eyes of a young survivor.
Yes.
And so we make these available to teachers to share with their students before the students come to the museum. So hopefully our visitors can be speaking up and trying to make a difference, trying to raise the alarm bells and helping people that are suffering from genocidal activity throughout the world. And then we thought it was important to end in the United States. We don't currently have genocide here in the United States, thank goodness. But we do have prejudice and discrimination.
A lot of it, especially in the last few years, yes.
So throughout our history, you'll learn, really.
But it just becomes...
it feels like it because we're living through it.
I think because of social media and we see all the... I think when more information is evolving, you open Facebook, you see
You do, it's so present.
It's so present right on your face.
But you'll learn in this gallery that it's been an evolutionary process. We were founded on incredible ideals that all men were created equal. But from the very beginning, it was only white, Protestant, wealthy men. Mm-hmm. And so over our country's history, it has taken upstanders working through the democratic process to bring about change. Mm-hmm. And it's ongoing. And it's all of our responsibility. Yes. And so I'll show you, we look at different groups of people that have really had to continually fight to make sure that our rights, that everyone has those equal rights. Mm-hmm. And so our hope is when people leave this museum that they'll understand that we're all a part of that process and that we have to continue to work for it. We learn about Texas upstanders. It's important to know about people that have made a big difference here. And then most of the content is conveyed through this touchscreen media. Mm-hmm. We talk about American ideals, American reality, the reality that those ideals haven't applied to all of us, and repair.
Yes. Human trafficking, big deal right now.
That's right.
Women's rights, we're fighting, still shattering that glass ceiling, right?
Our goal is for everyone who comes to this museum to find history here that's relevant to them and their family's story. And to understand, there have been times when it might have seemed hopeless, but there were always courageous people willing to stand up and do the right thing, and we all have the power to do that. And each of them ends saying the story continues with you.
So crazy, that is so, because I remember coming when I first came to Texas, and I was standing outside waiting for my son, Muhammad. He never forgets that. I was picking him up, 4th grade. And there was this little girl, every time she sees me, she would laugh at me. And I was okay, she didn't know how a strong person I am.
Right.
So one time she went into the car and she rolled down her window and she was like, "Hey lady from Afghanistan." And they all started laughing, including the adults in there. I was so disappointed that in a school and you're demonizing women from Afghanistan. Right. You don't know that at that time she doesn't know who I was, where I'm from, what my aspirations are, and I think about that, and I tell this story now that I'm the founder of the first Muslim sorority in Texas, and in the United States, the only functioning one, but I am hopeful, right? Because when I called the school and they wanted me to come and speak to the class about hijab and why I wear the hijab, and that doesn't make me less than, right? So I thought it's my choice. Nobody has forced me. My husband Charles would never force me to do it. It's something that this is who I am. This identifies me as me, Samira, right? But guess what? Living in America, you will always be with people, Muslims. You'll be with different people from this country because we all come from different places and different experiences that we all call America home.
We're hoping that after someone has gone through our museum, that they will feel inspired to try to make a difference.
So tell me, how did you get to be the president of the museum, this beautiful space?
I feel very, very blessed to be here because I do feel like we are making a difference and we have the opportunity to change behavior.
Yes.
I was on the board of directors. I started my career in public accounting and was at Hockaday School. I don't know if you know that.
I know Hockaday.
I was the chief financial officer and associate head there. So I was a business person of running a nonprofit.
Yes.
But I served on the board and I was very passionate about this mission. I believe, as I said, that children aren't born with hatred in their hearts and that if we teach them about their responsibility to do the right thing, most of the time they will. We're all human.
Yes,
None of us do the right thing all the time. But I was given the opportunity to come on board and help raise the money and design this exhibit and build the museum. There's some amazing volunteer leaders who really made this happen, but to work with them and help, sort of guide the process. And so it's like my third child. The last part of the journey is the memorial and reflection room. So we were founded by 125 Holocaust survivors. These elements, Samira, were in their very first museum. And these are, you remember how there were 44,000 camps?
Yes.
These were camps where their loved ones were murdered. And so that's why they're just a few. And then the panels on the wall have their names and where they were from. We know, from going through this museum, that people can make a difference.
I know we can. See, people like Mary Pat, you never thought that you and I would cross paths.
No.
Right? I never thought I would cross paths with you. Right. Like when they told me the woman is a CEO woman, she's coming out, she's a board chair. I was like, that is so amazing. Because, I wanted to come and get to know you as a human being, right? And connect and have that connection.
And I've so enjoyed this.
I so enjoyed this, and I will never forget this experience.
Well, thank you for your work.
You're my sister now.
Thank you for your work.
That was crazy for me to see and to listen and to be with Mary Pat, who, has put all this together. Like right now, you and I, Mary Pat, right? We're breaking bread.
And see how we're more alike than we are different.
I've learned a lot, and I've tolerated a lot. And to look at people's names who are put in gas chambers and think about it happening right now, like how immigrants are demonized because of the history, what Europe, the colonialism, and then coming right now and what we're going through. It's very heavy. Human beings, if you want to change the world and be a good person, you have to come and look at other people's history and what has happened to other humans. Then you will have that connection, and then you will bring about change. I urge people to come and see this museum and to see and to learn and, to look at your own biases as well.